Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. Good to have you. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset, therefore it must be Zeyde's Story Corner. That's right, Zeyde's Story Corner. And tonight we continue on with the stories of Isaac Bashevis Singer. Wonderful stories. Yeah, very wonderful stories. Yeah, almost didn't make it tonight. Yeah. It was a close one tonight. We were having some power issues in the area. It was no power, and then we had power, and then we had no power, and then we had power, and then we had no power, and then it finally came on, and we will have power for the rest of the show tonight. It's all in proportion, right? We're if that is the least of our worries, then we're doing pretty good, and our hearts go out to all of those in Kentucky and those places that were impacted by this storm. We wish those who are injured a refuah shlema, and yeah. So anyway, we had one of Donald's favorite things, a cliffhanger. Yeah, we left off last week with a cliffhanger, so we probably should get to our stories, shouldn't we? If you don't mind. Okay. So let me get you on your camera, and then you can go ahead and you can start the stories, okay? Okay, here we are in the beautiful Eretz Israel at the Kotel. Actually, not the Kotel, because this is a backdrop. A very beautiful backdrop, as a matter of fact. Okay, so before we start, let us check and see who we have in the chat room. We have Donald, we have Kelsey Lynn, we have Veronica, we have Richard, and we have Marilyn so far. And there's those who are watching in the background who can't get into the chat room, but we know you are there, and we're happy to have you here. Okay. So, if you remember last week, we were talking about Shlemiel, who bought a milk goat, and brought it home, and found out that it was not a milk goat, and now he is on his way back again. Okay, so we pick up the story from there. Shlomiel arrived at the goat dealers and began to threaten and upbraid him. The astonished dealer pointed out that the goat Shlomiel was returning was indeed young and had milk-filled udders. Shlomiel took one look at the goat and was left speechless. When at last he found his tongue, he exclaimed, "All I can say is that I must have been seeing things." He apologized profusely, took the goat, and again started back to Helm. When he reached Pizak, he as usual stopped at the inn for some refreshment. He ordered chicken and dumplings, and to celebrate the fact that he had made a good bargain after all, some sweet brandy. The innkeeper, born thief that he was, couldn't resist swindling such an easy victim. Offering Shlomiel a second brandy on the house, he went out into the yard and again exchanged the goats. Where Shlomiel left the inn, night was falling. By this time he was maybe a bit tipsy, and hardly glanced at the goat as he untied it and started once again for home. When Shlomo returned to Helm for the second time, leading an old billy goat instead of a young female, there was pandemonium. Boy, there is a $1.25 word for you right there. Pandemonium. Okay. Word spread quickly, and the whole town went wild. The matter was immediately brought before the elders, who deliberated 7 days and 7 nights, and came to the conclusion that when a nanny goat is taken from Lublin to Helm, it turns into a billy goat on the way. They, therefore, proclaimed a law prohibiting the import of goats from Lublin by any resident of Helm. The old goat soon died, and Shlomo had lost 1/3 of his wife's dowry. Shlomo, having failed in his business dealings with Lublin, decided to try his luck in Lemberg. He had no sooner arrived in the city and settled himself in his room at the inn than the street on which it was located was filled with screams of people and the continuous loud blast of a trumpet. Shlomo had slept little on the way to Lemberg and had gone to bed on his arrival. He called for a servant and asked what the commotion was all about, and was told that a house across the road was on fire and that the fire wagons had arrived. Shlomo might have gone out to look at the fire, but he was exhausted from his long journey. After being assured that there was no danger to the inn and that the fire was being extinguished, he dozed off. On awakening, he went to the lobby and asked one of the guests how the fire had started and how long it had taken to put out. Was it done merely by blowing a trumpet, he wanted to know. The man Shlomo addressed happened to be one of Lemberg's most cunning thieves, and Shlomo's question immediately gave him an idea. Well, yes, he replied. Here in Lemberg, we have a trumpet that extinguishes fires. It has only to be blown, and the fire goes out. Shlomo could hardly express his amazement. He had heard of many wonders in Lemberg, but never of a firefighting trumpet. It immediately occurred to him what a great source of profit such a trumpet could be in a town like Helm, where all the houses were made of wood and most of the roofs of straw. How much does such a trumpet cost? Shlomo inquired. 200 gulden, the man replied. 200 gulden was a large sum of money. It amounted to almost the entire remainder of Mrs. Shlomo's dowry. But when Shlomo thought it over, he came to the conclusion that such a trumpet was more than worth the money. In Helm, there were many fires each year, especially in summertime. Houses and entire streets burned down. Although there were several firemen in Helm, their equipment consisted of a single wagon drawn by an ancient nag. By the time the wagon arrived, and with its one barrel of water, everything had usually burned down. Schlemiel hadn't the slightest doubt that the owner of a firefighting trumpet could make a fortune. He told the man that he would like to buy such a trumpet, and the other was more than willing to supply one. It was not long before he delivered a huge brass trumpet with a written guarantee that when blown it would extinguish all fires. Schlemiel was overjoyed. This time he was sure he was on his way to becoming a rich man. Back in Helm, Schlemiel displayed to his family and neighbors the amazing instrument that he had brought back from Lemberg. The word spread quickly, and soon the people of Helm were divided. Some believed in the trumpet's powers, and others maintained that Schlemiel had again been swindled. The matter would most certainly have come up before the elders, but it was summertime, and they were not in session. Schlemiel's father-in-law was one of those with no faith in the trumpet. "It's another billy goat," he said. Schlemiel was eager to demonstrate what the trumpet could do, that he decided to set his father-in-law's house on fire, intending, of course, to blow out the fire with the trumpet before any damage was done. His father-in-law's house was old and dry, and it was soon enveloped in flames. Schlemiel blew his trumpet until he could blow no more, but, alas, the house continued to burn. The family was able to escape, but all their possessions were lost. Despite the season, an emergency session of the elders was called immediately. The elders pondered the event for 7 days and 7 nights, and came to the conclusion that a trumpet able to extinguish fires in Lemberg lost its power for some unknown reason in Helm. Gronomax proposed a law prohibiting the import of firefighting trumpets from Lemberg to Helm. It was unanimously passed and duly recorded by Feivel Thickwit. Well, Schlemiel had lost his wife's dowry and had burned down his father-in-law's house. Nevertheless, he refused to give up the idea of going into business. Having failed in Lublin and Lemberg, Schlemiel decided to do business with some local product in Helm itself. Helm produced a sweet brandy that was Schlemiel's favorite drink. He decided to buy a keg of it and sell it in the market for 3 groschen a glass. He had figured out that if he could sell the whole keg full each day, he would make 3 gulden profit a day. This time, Mrs. Schlemiel made up her mind to help her husband. Schlemiel had no money left to pay the vintner, but his wife pawned a pin, and they bought the brandy. The following day, they set up a small stand in the marketplace, placed the keg and a few glasses on it, and began hawking their drink to passers-by. Sweet brandy, a refreshing, invigorating drink for all, 3 groschen a glass. Sweet brandy was a popular drink in Helm, but 3 groschen a glass was too high a price. Only one customer bought a glass quite early in the day, and he paid for it with a 3 groschen coin. When an hour had passed and there were no more buyers, Schlemiel began to lose heart. He became so restless that he needed a drink. He held the 3 groschen coin in his hand and said to his wife, "In what way is my money inferior to another man's? Here is 3 groschen, and sell me a drink." Mrs. Schlemiel thought the matter over and said, "You're right, Schlemiel. Your coin is as good as anyone's else." And she gave him a glass of brandy. Schlemiel drank it up, licked his lips, most delicious. After a while, Mrs. Schlemiel got thirsty too, and she said to Schlemiel, "In what way is my 3 groschen piece worth than another's? Here is my money, and let me have a drink." Well, to make a long story short, Schlemiel and Mrs. Schlemiel kept drinking and passing the coin between them all day long. When evening came, the best part of the keg's contents was consumed, and all they had to show for the day's work was a single 3 groschen coin. Schlemiel and his wife tried in vain to figure out where they had made a mistake this time. No matter how they puzzled over the problem, they could not find the solution. They had sold almost an entire keg of sweet brandy for cash, but the cash was not to be seen. Schlemiel believed that not even the elders could explain what had happened to the money he and his wife had paid to each other. This ended Schlemiel's attempts to go into business, and it was from that time on Mrs. Schlemiel began to sell vegetables in the market. As for Schlemiel, he stayed at home, and when the children were born, took care of them. He also fed the chickens Mrs. Schlemiel kept under the stove. Schlemiel's father-in-law was so disgusted with his son-in-law that he moved to Lublin. It was the first time in the history of Helm that one of its citizens left the village for good. Nevertheless, Mrs. Schlemiel thought she chided him, continued to admire her husband. Shlemiel often say to her, if the Lublin nanny goat had not turned into a billy goat, and if the trumpet had been able to extinguish fires in Helm, I would now be the richest man in town. To which Mrs. Shlemiel would reply, you may be poor, Shlemiel, but you are certainly wise. Wisdom such as yours is rare even in Helm. Oy. Okay. Okay, this story is called Joseph and Koza. It happened a long ago in the land which is now Poland. The country was covered with thick forests and swamps, and the people were divided into many tribes and waged bloody battles among themselves. They fought with bows and arrows, swords and spears, because in those days they had neither rifles nor guns. Their roads were dangerous. Highwaymen lay in wait for merchants to rob and murder them. Often, travelers were attacked by wolves, bears, boars, and other wild beasts. What, no tigers? No tigers. Okay, well, anyway. And there were the many warlocks and witches who had sworn allegiance to Baba Yaga the Terrible and other evil powers. No one in all of Poland could read or write. The people worshipped idols of stone, clay, and wood, to whom they would sacrifice not only animals, but human beings as well. Can you imagine such a thing? The most powerful tribe in Poland inhabited Mazovia, a huge tract of land near the river Vistula. Mazovia was ruled by a chieftain called Wilk, who had a wife named Wilkova. Wilk was a tall man with a ruddy face and flaxen hair. He had a mustache whose tips reached down to his shoulders. Other chieftains in the land possessed crowns made of gold, silver, and precious stones, but Wilk's crown was a hollow gourd with notches cut in its rim to hold beeswax candles. The candles were lit when Wilk wore the crown. Wilk kept a witch and stargazer called Zla, and the chieftain never made a move without consulting her. It was said that Zla could perform miracles. She rode in a carriage drawn by wolves and used a living snake as a whip. Once each year, it was the custom of the Mazovians to sacrifice their most beautiful maiden to the river Vistula. The people gathered at the river's shore. They drank wine, beer, mead, killed and roasted pigs, sang and danced all day long. Late in the day, when the sun was about to sink below the horizon, they brought forth the maiden. She was carried to a high cliff overlooking the river and thrown in. The Mazovians believed that this sacrifice would pacify the evil spirits of the Vistula. It was the witch Zla who each year chose the most beautiful maiden in the land. First, she read the stars for signs. Then she consulted with the devil. No one ever questioned Zla's choice. Wilk had 7 sons, but only one daughter, Koza. Koza had golden hair and blue eyes, and the chieftain and his wife loved her above all else. When Koza was 17, and the time had come for her to marry, many kings' sons came to Mazova to woo her. They competed in feats of prowess to see who would win her hand. One young suitor tore a wolf in half with his bare hands. Another strangled an ox. A third tore up a tree by its roots. Finally, the young men fought each other with swords. They were as cruel to one another as they had been cruel to the animals. Koza was forced to witness these wild tournaments, but none of the young princes pleased her. She was kind-hearted by nature and hated bloodshed. Every year, on the first night of the month of Quinisel, or April as we would call it, the witch Zla studied the stars to determine who was the prettiest girl in Mazovaya. That spring, as she searched the heavens on the appointed night, she suddenly moaned out loud. It was Koza whom the stars had revealed to her. When Wilk heard that he must sacrifice his daughter, he was grief-stricken. His wife fainted away, but Koza tried to comfort her parents. She said to her father, "If by giving my life to the Vistula I can satisfy the evil spirits and serve our people, I will gladly do so." The sacrificial ceremony always took place at the beginning of summer, on the first day of the month of Lepek, or July as we would know it. During the 90 days of waiting, the chosen maiden lived in a large tent erected in an apple orchard not far from the riverbank. The high-born young ladies of Mazovia came to keep Koza company. They sang and danced for her, wove wreaths of flower, and brought her gifts to sweeten the long vigil. One day, a wanderer appeared at the gate of Wilk's palace. He was tall, had a black beard, long black hair, and black eyes. He carried a pouch on his back and a large scroll under his arm. The Mazovians had never before seen a scroll, and they looked at it in amazement. The stranger told the guards that he had come to see the chieftain Wilk. "Who are you? Where do you come from?" he was asked. "From Jerusalem." The guards informed Wilk, who sent for the stranger. "What is your name?" Wilk asked. Joseph. Joseph? I've never heard such a name. Who are you, and what do you want? And we are going to have to wait till after the break to find out what did Joseph want. Okay, so everybody stay tuned. We will be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back, just as we said we would be. Okay. So before we go on, let us make sure we got everybody in the chat room accounted for. We have Donald, Kelsey Lynn, Veronica, Richard, Marilyn, Soshi, Regina, Marshall, David. I think we got everybody, except for those people who are watching in the background who can't get into the chat room. So we say hello to all the people that can't get into the chat room. Okay, let us find out what happened to Joseph and Koza. Okay, so what is your name, Wilk asked. Joseph. Joseph? I've never heard such a name. Who are you and what do you want? Joseph replied, I'm a Jew, and I come from the city of Jerusalem. I am a goldsmith by profession. I make bracelets, brooches, and rings. I am on my way from Krakow, where I made a crown with golden horns for the king. I spent over a year in his palace, and there I learned to speak your language. What are you carrying under your arm? Wilk asked. A scroll. What is a scroll? This one bears God's commandments. Which God's commandments? Is he made of bone, wood, stone, copper? My God cannot be made by human hands, Joseph replied. He has always lived. He is the creator of earth and the sky, the sea, all the living things, men and animals. Many, many years ago, he revealed himself to Moshe on Har Sinai and gave him his commandments. Wilk did not know what to make of all this. Finally, he said to Joseph, I would order a crown like the one you made for the king of Krakow. But this year is the time of mourning for me. Return next year, and I will have you make a crown for me. Why are you in mourning? Joseph asked. In 60 days, my daughter Koza is to be sacrificed to the Vistula. The God of Israel has forbidden human sacrifice, Joseph protested. How can that be? Wilk asked. If we fail to present the river with our most beautiful maiden, the evil powers will see that we get neither rain nor sunshine, and so our fields will give no harvest. If we do not bring this sacrifice to the Vistula, the river will overflow. It will be cold in the summertime, and our crops will perish." "Nonsense," Joseph exclaimed. "It is God who makes the crops grow. God does not demand that a young maiden be drowned. It is a sin." Wilk pondered Joseph's words, and then he said, "It is true that I am the ruler of my people, but I know little about such matters. The wisest person in my country is the witch Zlah. I will order my servants to provide you with food and a tent to sleep in, and tomorrow you will speak to Zlah. But remember, she reads the stars and serves Baba Yaga and other powers of evil. Should you anger her, she can destroy you or turn you into a hedgehog, a rat, or a frog. We all fear her because the devil and the abyss are the source of her strength." "I do not fear her," Joseph replied. "The word of God is stronger than all witches and devils." When Wilk's herdsmen and counselors learned about Joseph and what he had said, there was fear and confusion among them. Some insisted that the stranger was a messenger of doom and should be executed at once. Others thought that his words should be put to the test. After long arguing, it was decided that a debate should be held between Joseph and Zlah in the presence of the entire court, presided over by Chieftain Wilk himself. Joseph immediately consented. At first, Zlah insisted that it was beneath her dignity to debate with an unknown intruder, but Wilk ordered her to appear. The debate was fierce and lasted from morning till night. Zlah denied the existence of one God and pointed out how vengeful the spirits of the Vistula were, particularly Topel, whose palace was at the bottom of the river. She claimed that the maidens sacrificed to the Vistula did not really die, but became the wives and concubines of Topel. They danced, sang, and played music to keep him entertained. As proof of Topel's power, she related how, at the winter and summer solstices, Baba Yaga herself visited the king of the river. She came flying to the Vistula in a huge mortar holding a pestle the size of a pine tree in one hand, and in the other a giant broom with which she swept away the light of the world. Who could dare rebel against such power? Zlah warned that unless Koza was given to the river on the first day of the month of Lepek, there would be a storm, floods, thunder, and lightning such as never before. Hailstones as large as rocks would destroy the crops, and should any grain survive the storm, it would be consumed by locusts, worms, and field mice. Joseph unrolled the scroll he had brought with him. He explained what it said in the language of the land. God created the world in 6 days. God does not demand human sacrifices. He instructs man not to kill, steal, or bear false witness, but to honor his father and mother, and to be just and help those in need. Turning to Zlah, he said, "No matter how strong the devils are, it is God who rules the world, not they. And the maidens you throw into the Vistula, they drown and rot. No devil can keep them alive under the water. The Vistula is not deep. Look carefully, and you will see their bones." The sun was moving toward the west, but the debate continued. Wilkes' followers were divided into 2 camps. The older ones sided with Zlah. The younger ones were with Joseph. When Joseph saw that his arguments could not convince them all, he said, "My lords, I can prove to you that the truth is on my side." "How can you prove it?" said the chieftain Welk. "The grain harvest is the month of Serpian. Wait until the end of Serpian before you sacrifice the maiden. If the plague Zlah has prophesied occur, you will throw Kozai into the Vistula, and I myself will accept death at your hands because I misled you. But should these catastrophes not take place, you will have proof that I am right, and that the words I read to you are the words of the true God." Upon hearing this, Zlah flew into a rage and began threatening Mazovia with even greater misfortunes. But Wilk lifted his scepter, which was made out of amber, and announced, "It will be as Joseph has said. The sacrifice of Kozah is postponed until the end of Serpian. Until that time, Joseph is to be imprisoned in the dungeon." It was the law that once the chieftain lifted his scepter and spoke, nothing further must be said. All were silent. Only Tzla could not contain her anger, and she screamed, "By the end of the month of Serpia, Mozovia will be a desert." The Princess Koza and her ladies-in-waiting had not been present at the debate, but soon they learned what had taken place. Koza was prepared to give her life, but nevertheless, deep in her heart, she was afraid. She wanted neither to die nor to become one of Topiel's many wives and live in his underwater palace. When Joseph's words were repeated to her, she was filled with gratitude and love for him. She prayed to the gods of Mazovia that what he had said be true. Her ladies prayed with her. Meanwhile, the days were mild and sunny. The sky was blue. It rained several times, but there was no flood. Each time the clouds gathered, Zlai insisted that the storm was beginning. But the rain always stopped, and the sun and the sky became clear again. The month of Serpian, or August as we know it, approached, and the grain fields of Mazovia grew dense, golden, and ripe. The peasants had already begun to harvest the fields. They followed their usual rituals to ensure a good crop. Each village had its wooden rooster, decorated with green stalks of wheat and rye and tender twigs from fruit trees. The peasant girls danced around the rooster, sprayed water on it through a sieve. The Mazovians believed that in addition to Baba Yaga, there were many lesser Babas, as well as little imps called the Zeydes, who lived in the furrows of the fields and who could do terrible damage unless they were exorcised through incantations and special ceremonies. Although the time Joseph had set was almost at an end, Zlah did not give up. She continued to prophesy that before Serpian was out, the Vistula would overflow. She warned that day would become dark as night, and from the forest would come babuks riding vipers. They would destroy the sheaves of grain, the peasants' huts, the haystacks, and the granaries. Topiel himself, his face red, his beard white, with the wings of an eagle and the feet of a bear, would emerge from the Vistula. He would strangle children and kill cattle. The river would spread itself all over the land. On the 20th day of Serpian, Koza asked to be taken to her father. She begged him for permission to visit Joseph in the dungeon. Wilk agreed and sent 2 of her ladies with her. When Koza was shown to Joseph's cell, she found him sitting and writing on parchment with a quill. Koza had never seen a quill, ink, or parchment. She fell on her knees before him, and both ladies knelt beside her. "Joseph," she said, "you are the greatest God of all." She began to weep and kiss his sandals. Joseph made her arise. "I'm not a god. There are no gods. One God created us all," he said. "Do you have a wife?" Koza asked. "No, Koza, I am not married." "Then I wish to be your wife." "As it is destined, so will it be," Joseph replied. He took 3 golden bracelets from his pack. One of them was set with a jeweled star of David. He placed it on Koza's wrist and presented each of her companions with one of the remaining bracelets. Since Joseph was convinced that Koza would not be drowned, that there would be no reason for Wilk to be in mourning, he had spent his time in prison making a golden crown for Mazovia's ruler. The Mazovians had no alphabet of their own, so Joseph had engraved the crown with Wilk's name in Hebrew letters, as well as the figure of a wolf, because Wilk means wolf. Excitement grew in Mazovia as the end of Serpian approached. Those who no longer believed in Zla, mostly the young, sang, danced, and were confident of Joseph's final victory. The harvest, an especially plentiful one, had been gathered by now. The women began to grind the grain into flour. As always, after the harvest time, the evenings were devoted to games and festivities. Riddles were asked, stories were told. It was the custom that the girl who had harvested the last furrow become a baba. She blackened her face with soot, braided thistles into her hair, and carried a large witch's hoop. One of the boys impersonated a rooster. He attached wings to his shoulders, put a comb on his head, and tied spurs to his heels. He crowed and flapped and made believe that he was about to attack the girl Baba, while she cackled like a hen and plucked feathers from his fake wings. Later, the harvesters and threshers built a huge bonfire on which they roasted sides of pork and chestnuts. They drank mead and beer. The nights were dark and the days were bright. The falling stars were frequently seen. The frogs croaked with human voices. Despite Zlah's prophecy that any day the evil spirits of the Vistula would emerge to bring havoc, the young people went bathing in the river at night. The older people, who still believed in Zlah, warned that Serpian was not yet over. They were certain that catastrophe would come. Many of them left their valley homes and camped on the hilltops to save themselves from the deluge. Others pointed out that it was not yet too late to choose another fair maiden to throw into the Vistula. Zlah continued to shower her curses on Joseph. She foretold that on the last day of Serpian the sun would be extinguished, the moon would fall out of the sky, the trees would wither, and everything alive would perish. The waters of the Vistula would turn yellow and hot as boiling sulfur and cover the entire earth. The last day of Serpian was the most beautiful of all. Not a single cloud marred the blue sky. The birds sang endlessly. The air was sweet as honey. Yet, until night fell, Zlah was sure the flood would come. When the golden sun set behind the Vistula, she tore her hair, wailed and screamed, and whirled about in a frenzy. But the world did not come to an end. Throughout Mazovia, the news spread of Joseph's victory and of his coming marriage to Koza. Zlah was so humiliated that she hid in a deep cave. Now that Joseph had proved right, his freedom was restored, and Wilk was prepared to give him his daughter in marriage. But there were many obstacles. And that is where we are going to stop for this evening. And we will pick this up next week. Another cliffhanger. Okay. So, it's got to be one of those buttons. Yeah, I know. It's got to be one of them. There we are. Okay. Okay. I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. Tomorrow night is the Rabbis Discuss. Should be very interesting. The rabbis are going to talk about, should Jews own dogs? Imagine that. Okay. And then on Wednesday night is the Torah study in depth with Rabbi A. And of course, Shabbat services, Kabbalat on Friday night at 8 p.m. and Shachrit and Musaf on Shabbat at 10 a.m. And then right back here next Monday for the rest of the story, and we shall find out what happens to Joseph and Koza. So until then, my dear friends, we will simply say, Laila Tov.